So, today we're going to talk about the many facets of love and where we learn what love is. I highly recommend watching the movie. It is like British comedy, Christmas, relationships, all those kind of things woven into one. So, for anybody who is new, I am Cassandra Stark. You can call me Kaz. I am the creator of the BMO Journal and the author behind the BMO Practice, which is a self therapy journaling method designed to help you with breakthroughs and self understanding and emotional safety and inner clarity. And we're building a whole community around that. And I love how this is just, I feel like 2026 is going to be the best year, taking off with a lot more interactions like this. So, as you move through the BMO practice, you move through 4 stages of self discovery, which I have named Feel, Deal, Reveal, and Heal. And today we're going to be working through all of that with a theme of love. So, if you have seen the movie, you'll know some of these scenes. And like I said, if you haven't seen Love Actually, you won't need to. But this is the movie that I hadn't really paid attention to until maybe the last 10 years or so. We watch it every single year now. It is my partner's favorite movie. We watch it every Christmas Eve. Um, and this year it kind of hit me differently with a number of different relationships in the Love Actually movie. Like before now, I used to think this is a movie about a dozen different relationships. And this year it hit me for the first time that this is not a dozen different relationships. This is actually a representation of a dozen situations, and it's about one relationship. It's about the things we go through, the relationship with ourself. So, for example, in the movie, we have a father who is dealing with his partner has passed away, and now he's got a stepson that he's alone with, and he's trying to figure out how to be a father to this kid who no longer has a mother and he no longer has his partner. There's brand new love, there's child first love, there's hopeful love, there's divorce and then finding someone new, there's unrequited love. Like there's love at work, like between like a rock star and his band manager. So it's representing all of these different situations. But the truth is, and I don't know, maybe it's just me, but the truth is that it's kind of just one lifetime and the love that we move through in that entire lifetime. So, for example, there's Sam, who is probably about 10 to 12 years old, who is experiencing his first love. And he just wants to impress the girl. And like, how many of us have been that 10-year-old who's just like, oh my gosh, do they notice me? Do they even know my name? And he's all concerned about whether or not she even knows his name. And then there's the love that deals with loss. And how many of us have lost someone so dear and so close to us? And then there's the love of hope, that young adult, like, are we going to hold hands or not? And then there's the love that doesn't respond. There's the one that you love and they don't love you back. And then there's the brokenhearted love. And there's just all these different things, but we all go through every single one of those. Like I personally have even been the band manager who spends Christmas Eve with my band, which is one of my favorite parts of the entire show. But that just represents career in general, like the love that you have with maybe like your work bestie? So it's a complicated and beautiful woven story all about love. And at the very beginning of the movie, it's narrated by Hugh Grant. And at the very beginning of the movie, they're showing like an airport scene. Back in the day, some of us are old enough to remember when you could actually like go into the airport to the gate and like hug and kiss and hold up a sign and be so excited. So it's an old school airport scene because you could actually go to the gate. And it's just showing all those people who love and miss each other, and the people who are crying because someone has left, and the people who are screaming with joy because someone has arrived. And it's just expressing that aspect of love that we all experience. And he opens the narration with love actually is all around. And he closes the movie in the same way at the airport. And so, it's just talking through those relationships briefly. It's easy to realize that love is not just one thing. It is many things. And the little kid in this movie, Sam, very hilariously expresses love as the most painful thing he's experienced so far in his life, and his older stepdad is trying really hard not to laugh about it, because how often is that true? How often do love and loss and hope and pain and that just complication of it go hand in hand with the blessing of it too, and the just excitement of it, or the hope for what could be? And so in the movie, they represent love as betrayal, and love as unmet needs, and love as a moment inside of you where you quietly break. They represent it as longing or timing or lack thereof, and love as knowing something that will never be yours. Love as effort. Love as I want to understand you. Literally in the movie represented with I will learn another language so I can speak to you. It's represented as love as presence and guidance and chosen family and showing up and lost soulmates and grief and unconditional love for children, whether or not they're yours. Love as grief and love as emotional truth. Love as what you don't get to have, love as what you're trying to have, love as inappropriate, love as should be's, would be's, could be's. And so it's kind of amazing in that way, and it makes you think. So today I want you to think about all the different loves in your life and the phases of love, from being like 10-year-old Sam and that first crush. Mine was a kid named Justin who played basketball in second grade. And I was like, does Justin even know my name? Like you could remember that, right? You're like 7 years old and you totally remember that. And you can remember the ones that have broken your heart, or there's someone right now, someone you are married to that it's complicated, or somebody that you want to hang out with and it's complicated. And Christmas, this holiday season, really brings out, unfortunately, the pain side of it, right? We pay more attention to the losses of the things that we've loved, or the hope of the loves that we want, the family that we want, the gathering and the light that we want. And sometimes, even when we have it right there in front of us, we're still disconnected from it. And so, kind of as a precursor to our much longer, more in-depth online event this Sunday that you can sign up for at bemojournal.com/events, we're going to kind of start tapping into that, like, comfort and joy in this season, and understanding the complications of not just black and white, but the really gray zones of the season. So if you do practice and use the BMO practice on that needs wheel, the word connection isn't there because it's technically smack in the center. And connection means to be seen, to be heard, to be known, which each one of those are in all three quadrants of the needs wheel. And connection is something that we are all intrinsically born with the right to have and a need. It is the need that we all have in common. It is literally the core of the core. So when you think about children, literally will not survive when they're born if there isn't that attachment, that being held, and that connection. But when you think about it, you don't always get the choice. You certainly don't have the choice right when you're born as to how you are held and loved. And you don't have that choice for many, many years to come. And so it's very easy to get into your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and still feel like you don't have the choice as to how you are held, connected with, and loved. But the BMO practice really brings you into understanding what therapists often say, which is, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. And then kind of like drop you there, like mic drop, and they don't explain it. And it feels almost it's so heavy. Like, if you're like me and you have had that, like, disorganized behavior and that fearful attachment, you tend to self-blame in order to take control. So being told something like that was very unhelpful to me. But I found understanding in creating the BMO practice. The way that I understand that personally is that I have the information of my life, of what has happened, what hasn't happened, what I lack, what those unmet needs are. The responsibility is mine to meet my needs, not because we were always only alone and only able to meet our needs, but those other, unhelpful sayings like you have to love yourself before someone else can love you. And you're just like, cool. Yeah, but how? Those other unhelpful sayings are really the way that I see it, using the BMO practice here is that when you meet your own need first, which is the same as the saying is put yourself first, which also no one explains how. When you put your core need first and you meet that for yourself, what you are doing is you're creating space in your life. It's kind of like I'm thinking of like surgery or something where you're like literally like making space. Like every time you meet your need, you're like expanding, you're growing taller, you're adding strength to who you are, the core of your being, like adding to your spine type of thing, right? Like boop, boop, boop. And when you make that space for love or connection or whatever that repeating unmet need is in your life, you're allowing people to come into that space. And the way that that works through that funk method has a lot to do with not just identifying your need, but that, like being able to show up for yourself in that way. These two things specifically help you guide yourself and your cans list into meeting that need for yourself. But as you meet that need for yourself, especially, this is why we end with the purposeful positives as well, as you keep on rolling through that, you start to have self-recognition, which in turn, rather than projecting unmet needs, which so many people do, now you're projecting self-recognition. It's a very beautiful thing because when you're meeting your need, your core need for love, for example, that self-love, you're trying to understand what your cans list is, what is working for you, what shows up for you. As that rings truer and truer for you, you start to recognize who is and isn't meeting that need with you, who is in that connection with you, who is joining you. And then a couple things happen as you start to have that self-recognition, which, projects into recognizing how others are showing up for you, is that far more easily than you could have ever done before, you start to hold boundaries and you start to let go of toxic people. Just let them go. Because you see over and over and over again how they're just not showing up to the show of connection. They're not in this mutual, you know what, you're meeting your need. I see you and I would love to join you and meet your need. And maybe I can talk to you about what I need too. They're not going there, right? And so you just kind of let them go and you start to surround yourself with the people who are. And it's not that anyone needs to be perfect, just like you don't have to be perfect. We're all work in progress. And what brings us together, that connection at the center, is that we're all trying. And there's a beautiful part in trying. So now that I've talked way, way beyond my notes, I don't even know where I am in these notes. But I want you to think about the love in your life, the love that you feel and connect to, as well as the love that feels like you're going through the motions. Because there's love in that. Even though, the reaction might say, we're just roommates and we never do this and we never do that. Thank you, Jen. Mwah, love you. Even when you're going through the motions, like the love in that is that you're still choosing to. And you're not done until you're done. For people who are wondering, when do I let go? When do I let go of someone I love? Whether it's somebody you romantically love or somebody like a parent or a sibling that's not really nice to you. This is where that saying of the only way out is through. Not around it, not coping with it, but literally, it's that sense of knowing you have done all that you could, all that you can. You have met your need. You have added to your knowing. You have done the work. You've repeated the pain on the page. You've tried to sort it out. You've tried to be there. You've tried this. You've tried that. And as long as you're going through the motions, as long as you are fighting, for example, that actually still is a representation of love because there's care in doing that. You wouldn't be fighting for and staying with if there wasn't desire and care in there, some level of love. But when you showing up with yourself first, so not self-assigning responsibility for their need or their education or their healing journey or how they show up for you, but meeting yourself first over and over and over again and showing up for the people that you love, that you're still choosing to show up for. There will be a point in which you get all the way through that and you get to decide if it meets you. So for anyone who's questioning whether to stay in something, just keep going. And if you need any help, just email me, message me. I will be there for you. So there's love that's like going through the motions. And there's the love of not knowing how to talk to someone because you love them. And so you stay quiet. Or you try. It could be your child. It could be a small child. It can be an adult child. It could be a best friend. It could be the marriage that you've had for so long. It could be the person that you want to say, I love you to. Even not knowing how to talk to someone, the desire to want to is an aspect of love. The silence of an empty home when you're now an empty nester or you have lost someone so close to you. That is love. There's grief there, and grief is an aspect of love, a very complicated aspect of love. There's the love that is an emotional affair, the one where society says to you it's not enough to end things, not enough actually happen, it's just emotions. And yet you know that something is forever changed, and that too is an aspect of love. There's stagnancy of staying, there's the familiar. There's grief of losing aspects of yourself. There's longing for, and there's struggle in so many ways. And not all of them show up as Hollywood scenes like this movie that we're referring to. But some of them still feel like we're acting. Like how many people here just comments or hearts? How many people here feel like there's an aspect of love, maybe even moving through grief or moving through marriage or moving through unrequited love that felt like you had to make it till, fake it till you make it, like you were the actor in the center stage of your life. So today, as you think through all of this, I want you to think about the stories of where you learned love. There is a beautiful book by Dr. Alexander Solomon that is called Loving Bravely. I highly recommend it because it's a blend of explaining love and where we learn love, and it has prompts, which are beautiful. I've used them myself. You can use the BMO practice with every one of her prompts and go way deeper than she would ever expect you to go because you have that funk method to move you through. But she asks questions like, describe your first memory of love. Describe who it was, what it looks like, what happened in that moment. How old were you? What aspect of it seemed like love to you? So that can be my parents sat on the couch together and watched TV. So sharing that evening time, and popcorn and Coca-Cola and holding hands and comedy, late night TV, that's love. It could be laughter. Like I think about some of my siblings' marriages. I am a lot younger than my siblings, and so I, in a sense, had many aspects of love, many versions of it that I was just looking at as, 10, 11, 12 years old. Like, love is laughter, love is community and surrounding yourself with people. But love is also maybe fighting, maybe complicated, maybe it's settling in your mind from what you learned. So ask yourself what your first versions of understanding love are, where you learned it. And, maybe write down in your BMO some prompts for yourself to work on later about that. Then you can also write about your first love and why it felt like love and what about it was love to you and what you've learned since that isn't love. And then try to derive that learning pattern. Try to think about what served you from how you learned to love and examples of love in your life. Some of us have had examples that don't necessarily serve us because they're not the full picture. Like when I journaled about this earlier this week, I always say things that I never expect to say. And I don't know how many other people this happens to so often. Like you would think that it wouldn't happen to me all the time, but it still does. I ended up writing about someone that I wouldn't even think was like a past old love or someone that important to my life. But what I specifically said was love was never, which is the great prompt to start with. So that's one you can write down to work on later. Love was never being picked up from the airport is something that I said. And it was really in my mind, I was thinking about a time that my dad I was asking him, how do I get to the airport? I'm flying a business trip for the first time. I'm young, I'm excited, I'm nervous, and he just got really, really, really angry. He wouldn't help me, he wouldn't tell me how to get there, and he ended up telling me to go to hell, Cassandra, and my stepmom, who was never on my side, about lost it. She was on my side in that moment. So I'm thinking about that when I say love was never being picked up from the airport. And then it occurred to me that this one relationship that I had with somebody that I had known in high school and then re-met later in life, one of the reasons that I thought it was love and that I maybe forgave or looked over far too many things that weren't loving is because he picked me up from the airport. When I was continuing those business trips, flying every single week, he would send a car for me if he couldn't do it himself. And he would tell this person that would pick me up, this is the most important person ever. Treat her well and pick her up. And that's cute. That's adorable. But how many things have we learned our love based on what we didn't get? And then we excused everything else because that was enough, because we're so used to not being showed up for, whether it's an airport or not. We're so used to not being shown up for that a glimmer of being shown up for is just enough. But I've also written about love and grief. This is the 25th anniversary of losing my mom. She died on New Year's Eve when I was 16 years old. And there was a lot of complication in that. But then, yes, that's the known story. Maybe there's a story like that for you that you've repeated and you know. But what's the rest of the story? For me, the rest of that story is, for example, I just talked about someone that I re-met from high school. I spent decades after my mom died only trying to connect to people that were old enough in my life, like from high school, to have known her. And that's something to dig into. Or how many things I didn't show up for in my life because she couldn't show up for them. How many relationships I held on to that I shouldn't have simply because they were from a time in my life where they knew my mother. So there's things like that when you're really thinking about where you've learned love, experienced love, if it is something to you because of something you didn't get, or if it is something to you because you saw it and you feel like you can't have it now, or it is fleeting or gone away. Maybe you used to have it in a relationship and you don't know how to reconnect it to it again. To dig into the examples of where we learned these beliefs around what it means, what people, what movies, what things taught us this. And to go back and really ask yourself that. So I promised that this one would be only 30 minutes. So I'm going to leave you guys with just some things, more things to think about, and some prompts to move through the BMO practice through. So you can use the prompts in place of flow, but still flow with it. Like if your story changes, if you end up someplace else, if you end up on another topic entirely, trust that aspect of your subconscious that's taking you there for a reason. And then work through the funk method, work through identifying the feelings of how you feel now, having gone through something in the past, as well as what it felt like then. That's kind of advancing to feel like, to really tap into the inner child work of, even if inner child work is last week, if it's in the past at all, to figure out how you felt then and then how you still feel now, or how you're feeling now, and bringing that up again. Then to meet yourself with compassion and understanding, to identify the need, to work through empowering your choices, and then to ground yourself with what you know, what you've added to your knowing as a result of going through these things. And then to end with those positives, those purposeful positives and self-recognition. So as we wrap up this little 30-minute session, I will give you a few prompts in addition to anything that we've already talked about or what you've come up with now. You can write about love actually is. You can write about love actually isn't. Maybe something you've learned that it's not. And then ask yourself, like I say, the quote that's in the original journal, bravely ask why enough times to know. If you've learned what love actually isn't, ask yourself why you ever thought it was that. Enough times to know, right? Another prompt you can use is what I want love to actually be is, or the best love I know looks like. Or the one that I personally used several times and love is the prompt, the love I knew never taught me. So think about those aspects of where you learned what it is, or what it felt like, or who it was, or who that person looks like, and then double check those beliefs. We had, earlier this year, I think it was the first online class I ever taught, we dove into limiting beliefs and how to identify them. And I feel like that's a class that I should reteach, because we forget, that in need to survive, in that element of day-to-day life, we just kind of skirt by and we often forget. And so I think that I'll do another deep dive into that early in this year. To really kind of identify where those beliefs come from and where they're still coming out in our life. Like when we're need-toing ourselves or shoulding ourselves or things like that. So we'll dive into that. And if you want to do a guided writing circle this Sunday, we have one online, and you can get a ticket for that still at beamojournal.com/events. We have a 4-week course starting in January that will be more than just journaling and diving in. We're going to be taking some tests. We're going to be understanding our attachment styles, how they change. We're going to understand more of the values and value-based needs that we have. And then we're going to build from that, and we're going to create more than hope, more than intention, and more than just goals and New Year's resolutions. So we're going to go into the new year with the far greater level of self-understanding. So it's 4 weeks that we go through that. And then there's a one-on-one session with me. We will record those events. So if you can't show up because they're workshop style, if you can't show up for whatever reason, there will be recordings. But right now, I think it's like 50% off online for Christmas. So you can join that also on the website. And yeah, I'll be actually reaching out to many of you and asking you what it is you want to know and what it is you want to work on in the new year before I start building out the rest of the year's events, because I really, this is all about you. I am here for you, to help you with those breakthroughs, to help you brave the moments of just getting through the really tough things in life, past and present, so that you can live more in that comfort and joy, which is the topic for Sunday's writing circles. So I hope to see many of you there. I hope to see you throughout the year and share many more breakthroughs together. And thank you for joining me today. I hope that this taught you some things and gave you lots to think about. And if you need help working through the BIMA practice and writing through that, just let me know. And I will see some of you Sunday. Thank you. Bye.